Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We are ready to begin. Today's webinar is eligible for one contact hour. Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society of Nursing is accredited as a provider of continuing nursing professional development by the American Nurses Credentialing Center's Commission on Accreditation. The speakers and planning committee members have disclosed no conflicts of interest. To receive contact hours for this educational activity, participants are required to attend the webinar and complete the evaluation form, which will be emailed to all attendees approximately 1 week after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available via the Sigma repository within a few business days of recording. Following the presentations, we may have time for questions and answers. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, you may do so by going to the GoToWebinar control panel. You should see the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen. You can send a message through the questions feature. This is where you can type in any question you'd like to pose to the presenters. Be sure to hit send so that the message makes it to us. To test this out, please locate your GoToWebinar control panel and type in your U.S. state or country of origin in the questions feature now. We'll give you a moment to do that. On behalf of Sigma Theta Tau International, or Sigma, we would like to thank our speakers for sharing their expertise with us today. Our speakers will consist of the following: Dr. Janice Brewington. Dr. Brewington is a Chief Program Officer and Director of the Center for Transformational Leadership at the National League for Nursing. Her education includes a BSN from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, a MSN from Emory University, and a PhD in Health Policy Administration from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She also received a certificate from the Management and Leadership Institute at Harvard University. She is a fellow in the American Academy of Nursing. Dr. Marlo Robinson. Dr. Robinson is a transformational leader in the nursing profession. She combines her nursing and law degrees to encourage and support others in continuously embracing a growth mindset. Dr. Judy Godsey. Dr. Godsey is an assistant professor and DNP faculty at Northern Kentucky University. She has formerly directed the nursing research program for the Christ Hospital, where she serves as a research liaison for all levels of nursing practice. She founded NKU's Nursing Research Collaborative, which was recognized through Sigma's International Research Advancement Award. With 30 years of nursing experience and numerous publications, her current research focuses on brand image of nursing and the essential brand of nurses as leaders. Dr. Tom Hayes. Dr. Hayes is the Dean of the William College of Business at Xavier University. In his 45 years, he has also served as chair of the marketing department and director of institutional advancement. Dr. Hayes' expertise is in marketing and branding services, especially in healthcare and higher education. Dr. Hayes won Case's Crystal Apple and Alice Beam Award for speaking and excellence in writing. He also serves as an ACE Fellow at Kenyon College. Today, our webinar will be moderated by Dr. Nelda Godfrey. Dr. Godfrey is a thought leader in the area of professionalism and professional identity formation for nursing. Widely published, Dr. Godfrey is a researcher, speaker, and philosopher in the area of scholarly pursuit. Her goal is to strengthen nurses' understanding of their own value as a professional and to be able to communicate this knowledge in a variety of ways. Thank you all for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. Dr. Godfrey, take it away.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. We're so glad that you could join us this evening and be part of this stimulating conversation that we're going to have. We have worked very carefully on our learning outcomes, and I think you're going to see that these will push all of us to think differently about a synergy that we believe is beginning to take shape between nursing's professional identity and its inconsistent brand image. We're going to also discuss threats to nursing as an influential discipline of health experts and leaders, and probably most importantly, outline a strategy to solidify the nursing profession's external brand image while actively cultivating the internal professional identity of nurses. So hold on to your seats, and we're going to introduce these concepts, and then we're going to have conversation. And as that conversation begins, we're also going to invite you to be part of that by posing your questions. First, we'll turn this to Dr. Marla Robinson and Dr. Janice Brewington. Go ahead.
Thank you, Nelda. So I have the pleasure and the privilege of introducing you all to the Tree of Impact. Let me give you a little bit of background on this. So there have been 3 think tanks, and in those think tanks have been some of our profession, the nursing profession's leading experts in practice and research and education. And in the inaugural think tank, with the steering committee, there was an exercise with a former Hallmark artist who put pen to paper to really begin to identify those attributes that we as nurses identify with. And so I'm really going to ask you and encourage you to just take a look at this visual representation that's so rich in all that encompasses how we see ourselves as people, as individuals, but also as professionals. And so I'm going to call out just a few of mine because they are so full of information and knowledge. Safe quality care. And look at the branches as you do this: engagement, action, humility, patient-centered, self-care. So, and then there's the trunk, kind of all that holds it together in professional identity, formation in nursing. And then there are the roots. And so just take a look at some of the action words that are used to describe who we are as a profession. And it ranges from maturity to integrity to accountability. And if you can see, I'm not sure if you can see underneath the Tree of Impact, but there are kind of the basis, the foundation that gives rise to all of these different descriptors that embodies who we are, again, as I shared, as individuals, but also as members of a profession. And so what you're going to learn as we continue to delve into this, as in terms of just defining who we are as a profession, not allowing others to define that, but we're defining, we're identifying, we're naming who we are as professionals. We really found that while we all may have given different descriptors, at the end of the day, it kind of started with who we were as people. It started with the individual titles that we brought to the nursing profession. It kind of originated with our why, right? Like, why did I want to become a nurse in the first place? Was it influenced by someone that I knew or admired? Has it been a lifelong dream or just generational in our families? And so all of that, this Tree of Impact, captures all of that, that rich, diverse background in just one beautiful, powerful, rich representation of who you are and who I am and who we are collectively in our nursing profession. Next. And so if you will please just continue with me and make the connection between what you just saw in the visual representation of who we've identified with the descriptors as our qualities in nursing, to then all of that richness in a succinct definition. And so I am going to ask for your forgiveness ahead of time as I read this to you, because then I want to break it down a little bit and have some discussion. So, professional identity in nursing, a sense of oneself and in relationship with others that is influenced by characteristics, norms, and values of the nursing discipline, resulting in individual thinking, acting, and feeling like a nurse. Wow. Right? All of those words that we saw, from the branches to the trunk to the roots, captured succinctly in this definition that starts with a sense of who you are, emotional intelligence, professional identity, your why, as to how you even ended up, right? Everyone has a story. How did you end up as a nurse? This definition captures that why, starts with you, but then puts you in relationship with others, because we know that nursing, on top of being evidence-based, is independent in its practice as well as collaborative. And so we move from ourself to our relationship with others, other nurses, other interdisciplinary team members, that is influenced by your whys, the characteristics that you brought into this profession, your norms, your values, your ethics, and how then that discipline results in the way you think when you interact with one another, when you make decisions about patient care, when you speak to your colleague, when you speak to yourself with that inner voice that kind of goes around and around, the things that you say as a professional is all impacted, the way you feel. And ultimately, for those of us that have the pleasure of mentoring other nurses, how when we say think like a nurse, we're able to take that phrase and turn it into action, because it starts with thinking, but it's so much more when it exhibits itself through our actions and our interactions. Thank you.
Dr. Brewington?
So professional identity in nursing, it's blank. Yeah. Professional identity in nursing really is a mirage of a lot of entities that fit within professional identity. It's about a foundation. And without a foundation, you can't operate. You can't think like a nurse if you don't have a foundation. And if you don't have that relevance in relationship to what nursing is, what it means in relationship to providing safe patient care, and how you operate as a nurse. So there's a foundation that becomes very important in terms of professional identity in nursing. So it's about your values and ethics. And these are core values. But you have to have core values as an individual in order to understand what the core values are for professional identity in nursing. So you have values and ethics that will promulgate throughout the nursing profession. And so that's one of the foundations, who you are as a nurse, what are your values, and how do you operate, and how do you bring those values in? For example, one of the values could be caring, could be diversity, it could be integrity. But how do you operationalize those values and ethics in nursing to provide safe nursing care? Then it's knowledge. Knowledge is the underpinning of nursing, of the nursing profession. If you don't have knowledge, how can you be a nurse and operate in a profession where you are charged, where you are responsible, where you are accountable to making changes in the healthcare delivery system, where you're charged with making changes for people of color, you're charged with ethics, and you're charged with dealing with equity. So knowledge of this is important. And leadership is about becoming self-authorized to lead. It's about taking up your authority to be a leader in nursing. It's about change agent, being a change agent, and making those crucial changes in all aspects of the healthcare profession. And then professional comportment. It's about how you behave. It's about think like a nurse, act like a nurse. So if you don't have those values, if you don't understand behaviors that you're supposed to demonstrate, surely you can't have professional identity in nursing. Next slide. So, we have to define what these entities are. We call them domains, because if you don't have a definition, then you can't operate, because you don't know what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to behave. So you think about your values, and that's a set of core values and the principles. It guides you. It is like the North Star. It's about what leads you in order to be a nurse. And then you think about the knowledge. It's about, what do you know about nursing? What do you know that you can tell other people about what nursing is? How do you apply that knowledge and expertise in order to provide care for individuals, for communities, and for families? If you don't have that knowledge about nursing, you can't provide care. And it's about, how do you reflect? In terms of when you provide care, what is it that you do to determine whether or not you're providing the right care, or whether you should do something different as it relates to patient outcomes? And then leadership. Leadership is about inspiring yourself, and it's also about inspiring others. It's about a transformational vision. It's about being a visionary leader so that you can impact change. It's about being a change agent, because nurses should be change agents in the area of policy and all arenas in the nursing profession. And then it's about professional comportment. What words do you use? What behaviors do you demonstrate? How do people know that you are a nurse? What is it that you do, and how do you do it? And how do you provide the care that patients need in order to demonstrate outcomes? And how do you demonstrate evidence-based nursing care? Thank you.
Well, now we're going to talk about the brand image of nursing, looking at a macro level here. Who exactly are we as a nursing profession? And that's a question that my colleague and I, Dr. Hayes, got very interested in when he taught my students in a master's course, leadership course. And we were talking about what is the brand image of nursing. And we got into a very rich dialogue with the students about that very question. And the reason that this question is so important is that we need to understand who we are on the micro and the macro level, because nurses make up the largest group of healthcare professionals in the United States and in the world. And we need to be reminded of that, of who we are, of the numbers, the sheer numbers that we make up. The Institute of Medicine's Future of Nursing report also reminded us of who we are. We are leaders. We should be seen and act as leaders in transforming the U.S. health profession. And we should be full partners with physicians and function to our full scope of education and training, which is so often limited. Unfortunately, there have been a consistent amount of literature over the past 20 years that say we're not achieving this, and that we lack autonomy, influence, and empowerment. So this isn't new news. We've been told this for 20 years now, that this unified strategy that would allow us to achieve this kind of full partnership, to function as leaders, to use the full scope of our education and training, that we have failed to come across with a unified strategy across academia, practice, leadership, and administration.
So the question becomes, what's branding and how does that impact this? So first of all, most people from a marketing perspective Branding allows organizations to create an image in the minds of consumers that conveys their core values, many of which we just heard in terms of the personal identity of nursing, and also differentiates them from others. So in marketing, a lot of people think that, first of all, that when they think of a brand, they think of a slogan or some kind of logo, which it isn't. That's not branding at all. Everyone has a brand, and we'll get more into that in a little bit. It's just the question of, are you managing it? So the brand, your personal brand, the brand of the profession of nursing, is really the sum total of all those associations that people hold. You know, it can be good, it can be bad, it can be ugly, but the question is, what is it? I mean, something already exists. So what marketing and branding tries to do is, you know, branding is the process of influencing those associations, and positioning is what achieving a researched and desired brand. So your brand, whatever it is where you are now. Your position is where you would like to be. And branding basically takes you from point A to point B. You're successful when your current brand equals your desired position. So how you like to be thought of and what you believe in essence of yourself, is that what others think of you as well? So positioning is really central to living the brand strategic vision. And it's a core to creating strong brand associations. So branding in its essence gives direction, purpose, and meaning to the brand. So what's the brand of the nursing profession? You know, when Judy and I started doing our research, we came across article after article that said, we should think about this, and, you know, and somebody should consider this. And they talked about all the different perceptions about branding. And so there was no instruments about how to measure the current or the desired brand image. So we decided to create one. And so over the last couple of years, we started off with focus groups to be able to come up with some of those associations, many of which were in that tree that you got to see earlier, in terms of how, you know, what were those things that you associated with being a nurse or the nursing profession. From those, we created a scale called the nursing brand image. And we then tested those scales to make sure they were reliable. And from a statistical standpoint, they were sound. And we found that we got excellent internal and consistency and reliability. And so then we also went off and created scales that looked at the current brand image versus the desired brand image. Originally, we researched 286 different nurses to look at the differences of these two things. And what we found is that there were incongruencies between how nurses perceive their profession and how they would like to be perceived.
So when we were developing these descriptors of nursing, we looked at what is the most current descriptors according to the 286 nurses that we surveyed. And what we found is the most common were the descriptors related to caring, compassionate, advocacy, essential members of the healthcare team, and patient-centered, which we would expect. However, what was a surprise to us and quite disturbing for me was to see the descriptors that were rated lowest by nurses. Look at that: leaders, powerful decision makers, experts, autonomous, interprofessional, influential, researchers, advanced degrees, and technological had absolutely no votes whatsoever in a current descriptor of the brand image of nursing. So this caused us to scratch our head and think, seriously? Really? Nurses aren't technological? How could that be? Houston, we have a problem. Nurses don't know who we are. And we need to step back and think about the true attributes that make up our profession. So we also wanted to look at, well, what is the brand position of nursing? So we talked about the brand image characteristics of a nurse. We took those characteristics that were chosen by our sample as the most desirable, and we created brand position statements, 10 of those. And we asked, okay, what is the current brand position of nursing? And the highest rating was nurses are caring advocates for the patients and public. And the lowest rating were nurses are influential leaders. Oh my goodness, that's the lowest rating. Nurses are influential leaders. I knew we were really onto something and that we could not stop. And Tom and I both were just so committed to continuing on with this work. And so particularly as we looked at comparing the current brand position with the most desired brand position, we found the most interesting thing happened. Nurses are leaders in education, research, and practice rose to the top. So being leaders went from being among the lowest brand position statements to leaders in practice, education, and research being the most desired brand position. And so this shows a comparison. We don't have time to go into all the brand position statements, but these four are the ones that show the largest differences between the current position of nursing and the desired. So these were all statistically significant differences between where we are and where we want to be. So look at these. Nurses are autonomous healthcare providers, empowered decision makers, prepared to be leaders in an era of healthcare reform, and finally, that most desired brand, nurses are leaders in education, research, and practice. So we asked nurses, do you feel like there is a consistent brand for the nursing profession? And look at this, 77% said no. So it's not just the literature that's telling us we don't have a consistent brand image. Our sample was perfectly consistent with what we see in the literature and agreed nursing does not have a consistent brand image.
So the question became, we also asked, why do you think there's not a consistent image of the nursing profession? And our statement that really captures the whole thing basically comes down to, because no one has yet it's not been defined. No one's put it together yet. And so that was the challenge that we were looking at in terms of creating those brand positions. And so remember, what is your image now versus where you would like to be is what we're sort of focusing on here. And so our research demonstrated that all the things that we had seen in the literature was true, that there wasn't this consistent image, and it was not being actively managed or communicated within the profession or externally to the general public. As I mentioned, everybody has a brand. The question becomes who's managing it. Because if you're not, it's going to be the outside markets and the outside of the nursing profession that does. So for example, when you think about all the literature about how nurses are portrayed in the media, that is because you're not doing it yourself. Somebody else is whether it's television, movies, whatever, has taken control. So the first step is what we looked at is to identify the current brand. And how does that how does that work in terms of how the public, do you like it and where that is? Then we went to what image would you like, and then design strategies to achieve it. We asked people who would be responsible for doing this. And the number one answer was really, they thought, well, let's see, nurses themselves should be responsible for this. But Judy's already pointed out that there are, 3.4 million nurses, I guess, just in the United States. And if you're looking at that, how can 3.4 million nurses come up with a consistent image? If you looked at the number of nursing schools or hospitals, how would they all come up with a consistent image in order to make this work? So in the reality, from a strategic standpoint and from a macro standpoint, we basically feel that we need to be thinking bigger in terms of how do we create this image and then work downwards. So given that brand image is, the whole concept of effective branding is a consistency of message and action over time, we truly believe that the major professional associations are in the strategic position to efficiently lead such an initiative.
All right, and so I'm back again, and it's time to go to the panel discussion because we want to try and address this third objective. So I'm going to read it to you. I want you to think about what we're going to create in the next few minutes here. Outline a comprehensive strategy to solidify the nursing profession's external brand image while actively cultivating the internal professional identity of nurses. So Judy, before we go to the panel, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the connection between the work that the International Society for Professional Identity in Nursing has done on professional identity and how your work fits with it and how we ended up being in this panel tonight.
Well, by really good fortune, Nelda, we got to be on this panel tonight. You know, it's nursing is an interconnected network of professionals, and fortunately, we were brought together. And it was very a wonderful thing that happened because there's just such congruence, I think, with the work of professional identity of nurses, which describes, as you have just heard from our wonderful speakers here, the descriptors of what make up, that describe the competencies and qualities of the professional nurse. The work that Tom and I are doing is looking so much at the, we've mentioned external or macro level of the nursing profession as a whole, and what our strategic imperatives are for determining what our brand is and living that brand and promoting that brand across all walks, all corners of the nursing profession: academia, practice, research, in administration. And so what works so beautifully with professional identity of nurses is that nurses then can live this brand on the individual level in all walks of life and whatever their professional area is.
Great, thank you very much. I just wanted you to make that initial connection, and I'm going to advance the slide one more time. Oops. I think I advanced something I shouldn't have advanced, perhaps. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. All right. So this is our beginning question for our panelists. A lack of cohesiveness exists among nurses, a lack of professional identity. Our group would have never come up with the signposts that we did, the values and ethics, knowledge, leadership, and professional comportment, unless we had had a dearth of understanding what that professional identity meant. So that's what this group has done. And then Judy and Tom in their work have identified a failure to communicate a consistent brand image for the profession. So now, what do we need to do next? What do we need to do next? Well, clearly at the bottom of the slide you have here, it talks about consistent strategies. So before we go into specific strategies, I know Judy and Tom have thought about some of those. I'd like to hear from Marlo and Janice about strategies, or first of all, your response to what each of your response to what Judy and Tom have had to say, and then your idea on some strategies. So Marlo, I think I'll ask you to go first, and I'd like for you to respond.
Absolutely, thank you. So I am absolutely fascinated with the work that Judy and Tom have done so far. It is a perfect marriage for the work that our group is doing in the identification and formation of the nursing identity. I think in words and pictures, and so I will share that with brand image being the macro level of all the kind of the core shell of all that we need to achieve, then the course objectives is everything that we're doing in professional identity of nursing as we formulate what that looks like, which we've done. You know, nurses are leaders. That's the takeaway from a lot of the work that we've done. It's the takeaway from the work that Judy and Tom has done. So that is the brand, that is the message. And what we've done on the micro level is we have provided a vehicle by which to drive that message, right? We've got the accreditors and the educators and those in practice. We've got those members, and we've got this audience, and we've got these panelists who can deliver that message. So it really is bringing that consistent message that we can all agree on, and now broadcasting that. And that becomes then the how. So how do you broadcast it? Well, it starts at every level. I mean, each of us are brand ambassadors at this point of that message. So if nurses are leaders, then in everything that I do and all that I say, as I embody that, as I self-authorize that brand and I live it, walk it, breathe it intentionally, that becomes the message. And we all have the opportunity to do that. We get to do that in our interactions with one another. We get to do that when we're looking in the mirror, and we get to speak that in each and every word that we share with our patients, with our colleagues, and with ourselves.
Thank you. Janice, what is
Yes.
your response?
My response is that this work that Judy and Tom are doing is so fascinating and so impressive. And there is a nexus there's a nexus and synergy between professional identity and brand, the brand image. However, you can't have a brand image if you don't know who you are as a profession. If you haven't been clear and if you haven't defined who you are as a profession. But let me take it a step farther. If you have not defined who you are as an individual, as a nurse, if you don't have core values that serve as a foundation for you, if you don't have core values like diversity, like caring, like excellence, if you don't have those as your foundation, how can you step up to the level to think about professional identity as a professional, as a profession, as a professional nurse? How can you do that? So I think it's about looking at what it is that we bring to the table in relationship to professional identity, taking it to that level of the system. And I think we have to think about this as a system, from a systems perspective. And as Tom and Judy said, you've got the micro, you've got the macro level of the system. So how do you merge these together? And how do you go from the individual to the group to the macro level in order to create change, in order to change the image of the profession, in order to create a brand that's going to be lasting and create a brand that people know? It's like when you see Nike, they used to use words, but now they use the swoosh. So how do we create a brand for nursing so that people know who we are, and they don't have to know that we graduated from an ADN program, that we graduated from a BSN program, because the foundation is there in terms of who we are as a profession.
Thank you. So Tom and Judy, I think we are poised for you to talk us through maybe some of the hard things we need to hear about strategies. So do you want to take a shot at that? And actually, Tom, I want you to speak a little bit about your background. I know I'm just hitting you cold with this, but you have a background in marketing that is amazing. And you need to speak to that before you and Judy start talking about strategies, please.
What really I get excited about working with Judy on this project and is because, first of all, I think I share her passion for how important this is, which gets me very excited. But from a marketing perspective, my whole career has been again, working with healthcare organizations and universities and helping them identify their brand, and so and the fun part of it is that, when you look at a large organization like a hospital, or you look at a large organization like a university, they all, think every college thinks it's its own thing. It's like the business college is going to be different from the nursing college versus from the law school or whatever. And the reality of it is, if you're looking for a brand, you have to find the singular DNA that's among all those things, that connects all those variables. And because if you're going to be successful, there's no way you can have 6 different schools or 6 different parts of a hospital can communicate what they are consistently and not mix up the messages. And so, the thing about marketing and services is that how do you get to that part with a complex organization? And nursing, being the largest organization in the world of healthcare providers, you couldn't get more complex than that one. So how do you bring all this to a consistent message? And so the cool part about this, in my mind, is that connection between, when I think about professional comportment, that is what Judy would call living the brand. That's what we're talking about. If nurses want to be seen as leaders, at one level, you've got an association saying nurses are leaders and having journal articles about it and conferences about it and reinforcing it at all those levels. But at the other hand, the most important part of it is the person who has to live the brand. So again, going back to what we've heard from our panelists tonight, how does somebody, how do you act if you're a leader? What does that look like in everyday life? What are the things you're doing? What are the decisions you're making? How do you carry yourself, et cetera? All that, it sort of goes from both directions.
I also think, Nelda, it's about awareness and intentionality. So we started with research. And of course, I'm a researcher, so I'm going to push research. But it gave us the answer we were looking for. We identified a gap, and a significant one, between where we are and where we want to be. And what came through very clearly is that nursing as a caring profession is something everyone gets. And we're not going to get into this tonight, but we've also surveyed the public. They get it too. Everyone gets nursing is caring profession. We are not here to suggest that we not own that, claim it, and love it, because it's wonderful. What we would like to suggest to you is everyone knows that. What do they not know? What they don't know is nurses are leaders. And that's where the intentionality comes in. If that becomes the brand, then we begin to look at ways that we can infuse the brand through all areas of nursing. And who can argue with that? I mean, that's something we can all agree on. Nurses are leaders. So how do we live that? And how does that get exemplified in all the areas that nursing touches?
Thank you very much. So colleagues who are on the webinar, I'd like to invite you to go ahead and post any questions that you have in the chat. We're going to continue. I'm going to ask Tom and Judy to be more specific now about strategies. And we'll do that for a few minutes, but then we're ready for your questions. So please feel free to enter your own questions in the chat. Judy, Tom, take us through strategies.
Well, I'm going to ask Tom to use this example that I think I've seen in so many audiences and with my students, that it really drives home how important having a consistent message is. What does that mean? And he gives an example that I saw him smiling, knows what I'm talking about. Tom, would you share that, please?
Well, this doesn't work on Zoom because but you'll get the idea. As I sort of alluded to earlier, when I'm working with a university that has multiple colleges, they all think they're different. And I carry with me when I'm presenting there a number of plastic golf balls in my pocket. And I have typically I take 6 of them out and I hold 3 in each hand and I say, this is your law school, this is your business school, this is your nursing school, this is your arts and science school, etc. And think about each one of these individuals, each one of these schools has a message about who they are. And I throw it at somebody. And it bounces all away from them. And, and the idea is that, first of all, nobody can get all those messages. No school has enough money to be able to get all those messages across. It just confuses the public. So then I pull one ball out of my pocket and I throw that and I say, catch this. And so the idea of consistency of message is that it narrows down what people have to learn. But also, if you do the same thing in message and action, again, so that you're not only talking about it, but everything you do as an organization, in this case, a profession, points back to the same message, people will eventually get it. And it's not something that happens overnight. So if I'm working with a hospital or a university, in order to change the perception and create the position that they would like in the marketplace, it usually takes 3 to 5 years. Because again, it's something that you have to repeat and repeat and repeat, but also you have to live. It's not something that somebody just says. It's the people who are part of the organization are acting in that same manner. So again, this is where we see very much the combining of these two areas.
And you also have to protect it. We talked earlier about taking charge of our own brand. Tom mentioned, if we don't manage it, someone else will. And I think that's what we have seen, particularly in the media, that if we do not take hold of our own brand message, there are others who are perfectly willing to do it for us. So once we determine what that message is, then we protect it, guard it, and we control it.
All right, thank you. So we need specific strategies. Do you want me to go ahead and advance the slides? Maybe I can try and advance the slides for us. And talk about strategies. So, Judy and Tom, do you want to fill this in for us? Talk about this?
Well, I'd like to see if, again, to make sure we have all, see if Marlo and Janice have any. We've thrown in some of the strategies. What do you people see?
Good.
Yeah. One of the things I think that's important in terms of strategies is that we have to teach nurses how to think of themselves as leaders.
Mm-hmm.
That is so important because they don't think of themselves as leaders, so they don't understand how they should behave as a leader. For example, they don't understand the power and influence they have in relationship to patient care because they are the influencers and they have the power in terms of providing care to the patients. They serve as the link between the patient and the technology. And they are leaders in their own role. For example, when you think about nurses, and not just nurses, but we're talking about nurses now, but people generally think that in order to be a leader, you have to have a title. That's what leaders are. You have to be a CEO. Or you have to be a chief program officer. But what they don't understand is that they have to take up their own personal power to lead and that they have to become self-authorized. So they take up their authority to be leaders and understand that they are leaders and how they lead in terms of being the leader of patient care and healing. It's about healing. And that's what nurses do. And you definitely have to be a leader to be able to do that. So I think that's one of the strategies. We have to socialize, we have to teach them, and we have to start early. We have to start in nursing programs. This does not start, when you walk out the door and you become a novice nurse. It starts in the schools where you have to integrate in the curriculum leadership. But not only that, but what does it mean to be a leader? You talk about behaviors. When Judy, when you and Tom talk about, the brand image, how do you behave? And so I think though that becomes really important in terms of a sound strategy that becomes important.
Janice, I love that point about it starting in academia and starting right away, right out of the gate. And I think that is a critical step. This is not about all programs should offer a leadership class. This is about there should be leadership, nurses as leaders, threaded throughout the entire curriculum in every course, nurses as leaders, because that is the way that we function on every level. And so just to try to teach this in one course is not going to cut the mustard. If we're going to look at a cultural change that nurses begin to see themselves as leaders and live the brand as leaders, it's going to take practicing that role as a student so that when they come through at the other side of the program, they're ready to live that brand.
That's right. Just like you just said, that it's not it's not about a course. It's about integration. It's about how do you integrate leadership throughout the curriculum in all of the courses. And that's what becomes important because then it becomes institutionalized and then it becomes sustainable in relationship to leadership. And what it will look like.
I would go back again and talk about things like how do you build this concept into the core of everything that's about nursing. So how do you, for example, how do you build the concept of leadership or this consistent message in the essentials? You know, if you're going to think about something that goes across all parts of nursing, you know, is this part of the essentials that so then it touches all components in all areas of nursing, so that you don't have to worry about one school is really stressing leadership but another one isn't.
That's
you know,
right.
so how do we make sure that it's across the entire spectrum?
And built into institutional strategic plans too.
That's right.
Yes. So let me ask you some questions from our participants. So question, and I think we'll direct this to Judy. How do you feel the focus on nurses in light of COVID and being frontline workers enhances the brand image for nurses?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you to whoever gave that to me. Wow, we are front and center on the global stage, and it is the International Year of the Nurse. Who could ever imagine that we would be living leadership like we are now? And aren't we doing an amazing job? So I think what better time than now, when we have such attention on the global stage, and the public is seeing nurses in action, living leadership. So what better time than now to take the reins of this and keep this momentum going, and looking for ways that we can continue to have a voice, a sustained voice that we're starting to see now on boards, in organizations, that we look for ways to be influential in areas that impact the direction of our entire profession, in areas of policy, for example. So I think that this is the perfect time to take what has happened with COVID that has thrust us onto this global stage, and just use that as a propellant to keep going.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's a wonderful answer. And I think everyone on the panel wants to cheer you on in what you have to say there.
That's good.
So I have another question, and Marlo, this is for you. How can we help our new nurses understand the changes our experienced colleagues have lived through to bring us to where we are today? Powerful, caring, educated nurses.
So I appreciate that question. There is so much to be had in storytelling, sharing one story. You know, I started the beginning of this wonderful talk by saying that we all have a story. We all have a why that got us here. And sharing that why can be so impactful as we intentionally accept a mentee, as we are very direct in wanting to reach out and assist someone, partner with them in their professional journey. We share our stories. We share, as Tom said, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's not anything to be ashamed about. It's something to learn from. What's the opportunity here? What's the takeaway? And how can not only in accepting and learning from that so I can make changes, how do I grow myself? But then how do I share that with you and I help you grow too? So it's really about us showing one another some grace, reaching out a hand, to be a partner and a mentor with another nurse. Age has nothing to do with it. The newness or how long we've been in the profession has nothing to do with it necessarily. It really is all about being intentional in wanting to partner and be collaborative, and all of us owning, again, as my colleague Janice says, self-authorizing ourselves first, because it starts with us, right? The oneness, that was part of our definition, but then applying that to the group so that I can accept the fact that I'm a leader and I can recognize and honor the leader in you.
Thank you. There was a question, should the foundational work of professional identity begin in education, meaning in school? And I would think we would have nods all over the panel with that question. And our time is running out, so I'm going to actually not let anyone answer that one and send this one to Tim and to Tom and Judy, because it's specific to your research. And I think we should ask that question of you. And it says, how did you determine who or what nurses would be surveyed? So can you tell us a little bit about your sample and how you went about this process?
Go ahead, Tom.
Take it away, Judy.
Yes, so at the time I was faculty at Xavier University, where Tom is dean now, and we decided to survey the audience of students who were alums in the Jesuit college network across the nation. So it gave us a national sample then. And so that's where we started. And then we also surveyed a number of nurses at the Christ Hospital, where I used to work, so that we had a clinical sample. We have continued to grow that sample, and we're beginning to merge, because we've been doing this about 6 years now. So that is growing and growing, because we know that it needs to be a more diverse sample. And I would just say, we would like to encourage more research, because this is a first step, and we are not pretending in any way that this is the end all be all. And we would love to see more research come as a result of this.
Thank you. Another question: how do you see a tie-in to the changes in the AACN Essentials? What do you see? Where do you see specific application or opportunity to bridge your work into the Essentials? So I'll give a little bit of background on this. The AACN Essentials are in the process of being revised, and they were revised last in 2008. So now we're over 10 years with a document that everyone understands is out of date. And we're in the final stages, or the organization is in the final stages of revising drafts. And so there's another opportunity before December 30th, to give feedback on the current draft of Essentials. So I can tell you that members of this panel have offered suggestions, if you will, or input to both the leadership component and to the professionalism component. And I can also tell you that throughout the last 3 years of work on professional identity has really formed a part of the fabric of the new Essentials, or revised Essentials, and we're very happy that we are now putting words to what it is that makes up the profession of nursing. We haven't really had those, and that's one of the things that can help with that. So we have one more question, I think, in our time, maybe two. What can retired nurses, what role can retired nurses play in this endeavor? Which I think is a critically important question. Is there one who would like to answer that? Janice, would you like to answer that question?
I sure would, because I think, retired nurses play a critical role. Just like Marlo said about the storytelling, I think, storytelling is really important, and they can serve as mentors for students in schools of nursing. And I think that's something that really becomes important, because it's about, how did you get where you are? What are your experiences? And what experiences have you had as a nurse that can inform where students are today and where the nursing profession can go? And see, sometimes what we do is we forget about people who have that expertise that they can provide, and they sometimes become forgotten. And I think we need to make sure that they are not forgotten, because they do have value, and they can serve a purpose, for novice nurses as well as for students. So that's how I see it, that they have a role, they have history, and they have expertise that they can provide that will be meaningful as student nurses go along their journey to become professional nurses, and to understand what professional identity is and how they can create a professional brand for the future.
All right. Well, I'm going to make a few summative comments here at the end. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for participating in the synergy between these two ideas. I can assure all of you who are listening that we all intend, all of the people you see on the screen intend to continue to collaborate. We each think the other has something to offer in this larger conversation. I also left the slide up right now that you see because there are some very strong, powerful messages here. Intentionally communicate the professional contributions of nursing. Consistently communicate the brand image that nurses are leaders. And really, it is up to us as members of this discipline to catalyze this effort enough that we actually do start to solidify and create a consistent brand for nursing. Those of us who've worked for several years now with professional identity think we're part of that pathway. Judy and Tom, with their pretty spectacular research, are also a part of that pathway. And we look forward to seeing more of your research that I know is in the hopper and you weren't able to share tonight with us. And we've got lots of information. You have made this so clear to us, Tom and Judy. You have made it so clear that we have a charge ahead of us and we need to figure out how to carry out that charge and do it as a whole, do it as one. So I would like to thank you all for joining us, and I think Matt needs to come on, but I'd like to thank the panelists for being part of this presentation this evening.
I'm thankful for having me.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Great opportunity.
Thank you so much to our presenters and to our moderator today for all this great information. Sigma is grateful that you took the time to share this information with our audience, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the future. As a reminder to our attendees, please submit the state or country you are from in the questions feature. We hope you've enjoyed this webinar. Be sure to check out Sigma's upcoming webinars, podcasts, and resources to support you and your colleagues at www.sigmanursing.org. Also, previously recorded webinars and podcasts are freely available on the Sigma repository. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day.